Welcome to the second series of creating this bus scene, this menu system. We're doing menu interaction and animations. So we'll be doing this, clicking the game, going into the bus, very jaunty screen recording, I'm sorry. And then also you've got an options menu with a sub menu behind it. If you haven't created this scene and you want to create this forest, this bus, and all this terrain, check out the first series of videos I've made. Otherwise, these first two videos will be dedicated to the UI, and the last two videos will be dedicated to all this animation. Enjoy! In the first part of this video, I'll be creating these two buttons with custom fonts and custom textures, and also adding some interactivity, so when I click on them, they disappear. Button interactions involve code, so this series is a great introduction for C#. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go to UI and create ourselves a button. So I'm going to expand the button object and edit the text to say new game. Next I'm going to create a custom font. So by default it's in Arial. So inside my assets folder I'm going to create a fonts folder. Now I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to open up Font Book and I'm going to find a font that I want. Here's a good one, Lato Light. Show in Finder. Then I'm just going to drag any TTF font files into Unity. Now if I click on what fonts I have available, I now have Lato and the text changes accordingly. Now we're going to customize the background of the button, the white box that the text sits on. So if you click on the texture field in the box component, you'll notice that you can change the box textures around. So to create my own button texture, my own custom button texture, I searched in the assets folder the name of an existing texture. So in this instance I searched for button space, but you can search for anything. Then I copied that in the Finder, so I've got my own version of it, and renamed it to flat button. Just to be on the safe side, I also called the meta flat button, so flatbutton.png.meta. And if we go back to Unity, we can now see that in our textures folder, flat button is a customizable texture. So I'm going to open flat button up in Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop, I highly recommend GIMP, which is free, and you can do the same thing. Just to check it works, I'm going to change flat button, its color to red. I'm going to save that, flick back to Unity. We've got flat button assigned to our texture button, so it should go red. Good. Now all you have to do is create yourself a custom graphic. I wanted like a white outline outside of my white text. So what I've done is I've just drawn white lines along the sides of the texture box as I'm showing now. So once that's all been saved as a PNG, you should get a graphic that looks like this. Now if you play around with the width and height, you get much better results than scaling the graphic. In the text component, I'm going to move my font to the color white, and I'm going to budge up the font size. Now after a font of about 20, my font started disappearing, and so what I had to do is move horizontal overflow and vertical overflow away from wrap mode and into overflow, just in case you get that issue. Finally, I'm going to create another button. So I've got new game and options. Alright, you got your buttons, and what you should notice is if you hover over your buttons, then there's a slight color change, a slight tint. I can make that more obvious by going into the hover color and changing it to a bright neon pink and hovering over again. Alright, now I'm going to change this hover over to an animation, so from color tint to animation. You see something like that, normal highlighted press, and you want to auto-generate an animation, and you should call it something and stick it in the assets folder somewhere sensible. I've got an animations folder, button animation I've called it. Give it a save. And once it's saved, you should get this animated component with button animation on it. So let's double click on that and we'll open up the animator window. We're going to get into animation big time in the last two videos of this series. These first two are dealing with menu UI. But all this button animation business, Unity provides such a good framework for this. And it's such a good introduction into how Unity deals with animations, which I'm going to show you now. So I'm going to grab the game window and open it up next to the animator so you can see both at the same time. But look at the animator window. By default, it's the normal box that's being filled up if I don't do anything. Now if I hover over the button, that is I hover over the button with my mouse, then the animator changes from playing the normal animation to the highlighted animation.
And finally, if I click or press the button, then the pressed animation will start to play. And through some scripting, I initiate this bus animation malarkey, and that will all be explained in the third video of this series. But let's look now at animating the buttons when I hover over them with my mouse. So let's get the right window up. Not Animator, I've got Animator open. Now I want to open up Animation, Apple 6. And you get a window like this. I'm going to drag it so it's next to my console. With the Animator window open, I want to select the item that I want animated. In this case, it's the button. Make sure it's the one with the button component attached to it, not its text inside of it, but the one with the button component. And you'll notice in the animation window I've got 4 states. I've got normal, highlighted, pressed, and these are all different animations I can play depending on how I interact with the button. So I'm going to do highlighted, and on the first frame I'm going to boost make sure it's in record mode, so you've got the recording button selected just above highlighted. I'm going to add property, and I'm going to select rectangular transform scale. You don't have to do all of this, you can just start adjusting the scale options in the inspector, but it's just another way of doing it. So 1.1, you see the button getting a little bit bigger. This red background means that it's recording the animation, which is good. For button animations, you only need to adjust the first frame, and then it will automatically tween to your changes. So if I click play, you'll see that the button gets bigger to the new adjusted scale, even though I've got 1 keyframe. And I can do all this again for the options button, adjusting the scale, and it'll go accordingly when I highlight. So this is all explained as well in an official Unity tutorial about an astronaut. It's brilliant. And I'll come back to animation in part 3 of this video series. So we've got stuff happening on button hover and animation, so let's turn our attention to button press. So now we need these buttons to do stuff, and we're going to have to do some coding. So up until this point we've avoided it, but now we're going to have to get stuck in. And if you're new to Unity and you're new to code, I reckon this is a really good introduction because it's just button clicking and simple things happening. And I've got all the code and gists in the video description below. And to kick things off simply, we will be coding this. Click on the button and it will disappear. So in your assets folder, underneath scripts, we're going to create a new script. I've got several more because I've got a Unity remote. I'll come to that later. So right click, create C# script, and I'm going to call it menu system. Now I'm going to add the newly created script. In the hierarchy, I'm going to click main camera, components, scripts, and add the new script on menu system. Okay, I'm going to double click the script file and it should open up in our code editor. The first thing I'm going to do is add the start game and options game object to the script. Now, the reason why I'm using game objects is I want them both to disappear after I've clicked on them. And this isn't something you can easily do if, say, I use buttons. So in the start function, I'm going to define my buttons. I've got the button type start button. And that's going to be start game object. And then I'm going to get the component button. Now you may be wondering why all of these button bits are in red. If you right click, resolve, and use the UI Unity engine, basically that adds that line and that allows us to use all the UI elements, and so our script will now run. I'm going to quickly define the button for options. So now we'll add an event listener for both buttons. So start button on click, add listener. So this will listen out for an on click. And then anything between these brackets will then be performed. I'm going to perform a simple start game console log, and then I'm going to set the start game object to false, so the whole game object will disappear after it's been clicked. Okay, so if I jump back into Unity and click the play button, I am going to get an error. This isn't going to work. If I flick into the console, I can see my errors. And this one literally means I haven't assigned objects to my script. So if I click on main camera, look at my script, you can see that start game and options have no game objects assigned to them. So I'm going to drag the start game object and the options game object. Now if I stop that and click play again, so the script reloads. If I click new game, then it disappears, just as we intended. Next video, we'll finish up all the scripting for the menu, how to find and manipulate game objects, and finish off all the code needed for this scene.